Hello, and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Ed Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any issue related to those issues. Today is Sundays with the Rabyd Atheist for October 1st, 2023, and we're going to continue on our little series in the book of Job, and today we're going to do Job chapter 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now basically, if you're going to break these four chapters down, you have Eliphaz the Temanite basically accusing Job, making his first accusation against Job, and then Job responds to it. Okay, so this is pretty basic. In fact, a lot of the middle portion of the book of Job is this dialogue back and forth between his three friends and himself, and then later on a fourth character will come in, and then God himself will join the discussion. So it's kind of like, a dialogue between friends, and we need to remember that Job is part of the wisdom literature of the Hebrew Scriptures, so it's trying to present some wisdom. We also need to remember, as I said last week, that at the end of the book we have an interpretive thought here, that everything that Job's three friends said, according to God, at the end of the story is wrong, and what Job said was right. Okay, and now that could be kind of in general about what, they're talking about, the main thrust of their discussion. They may still make some good observations about God or whatever, but in general, Eliphaz and his two friends get reprimanded by God for being wrong in what they said. And so whenever we hear them, we need to remember that that's God's evaluation of what they say. Okay, so I'm not going to read the whole text for you. I'm going to trust that, if you've got to stop the video right here and go and read chapter 4, 5, 6, and 7, go do that. Or if you just want to listen in and read it later, you're more than welcome. Either way, it's up to you. But basically, Eliphaz has kind of a 4-point charge against Job. Now remember, Job has laid out his complaint before God that God would come down and tell him what he did wrong, because he can't see it. Okay, he's saying, he's weary of life, life is futile, and I just want to know what I did. I just want to know what I did. Okay, and Eliphaz's charge is interesting because he says, number one, he says the innocent don't suffer. Now he says that a lot of different ways. He puts it in front of Job, that when have you ever seen the innocent suffer? Okay, we'll talk about that in a moment when I get to the end of the story, but I want to lay out the story. And so he basically says, if you were just and right, you wouldn't be suffering like this. Okay, the innocent don't suffer God's punishment. And what you really need to do is God is reproving you, and you should accept his discipline, and then at that point you can figure out what you did wrong, repent of it, and he will restore you. Okay, I mean, he basically says also that, can mankind even say they're just before God? And so God must be punishing Job for some sin of some sort, and all Job has to do is figure it out and fix it, okay, and repent of it. Now we need to remember God's own assessment of Job's character is that he is just and right. And so, this is a guy that he's literally sacrificing, a burnt offering for his kids in case they have sinned for them, okay, using his influence with God to make sure his kids are covered. And it doesn't say that that was wrong, so it's kind of interesting that, they take this take. Now, Eliphaz, of course, hasn't been hanging around, so he doesn't know all this stuff, all these details. So he keeps moving forward with this accusation that, Job, you must have done something. You must have done something to anger the Almighty. And so Job's response is, show me where I have. Show me where I've sinned. It says, and the problem with you as my friends is you guys can't show me where I've messed up before God. And so you're pretty useless. You're not very good comforters, because I'm sitting here saying, if you could show me where I was wrong, then I would withdraw my charge from God, pretty much. But he basically says, life is futile, okay, and I still am going to lay my charge before God. I want to know what I did wrong. I'll fix it if you can show me what I did wrong. And he basically looks at Eliphaz and says, hey, I don't get it. He's basically telling Eliphaz that his first charge that the innocent don't suffer is not true. He says, I'm innocent and I'm suffering. Okay? Now, at this point in the dialogue, this is a 4-chapter dialogue, and Hebrew poetry makes my tongue and my mind swim most of the time because they use a lot of extra words, and there's just a lot of prose here where everybody's just like waxing eloquent about God and all this other crap. And so as the wisdom literature of the Bible is never one of my favorite places other than Ecclesiastes. But I always felt the Ecclesiastes was a little bit more along the lines of a philosophical dialogue. So it appealed to me a little bit more than this did. Job's dialogue with his 3 friends is basically about the problem of evil and the relationship that God has to that and why Job is suffering. Okay, so Job is suffering all these things, so there has to be a cause, there has to be an agency. And so instead of putting the blame on God, okay, because we're not supposed to do that, we're going to place the blame on Job. Okay, now this is pretty typical stuff for the Bible, and quite frankly, as an atheist, I see this in religious people all the time. When you point out to them that God may have done something wrong, well, he must have had his reasons, or that God is not loving, or he's not just. Well, he lives in a different standard than the rest of us. This is kind of, the thing that his friends will do. Now, in the case of Eliphaz, the TMI's first accusation is the innocent do not suffer. And if I was sitting there, I'd have been like, dude, are you serious? Are you serious right now? What world do you live in that the innocent don't suffer? Okay, there are plenty of innocent people that suffer, die every day. Okay, and God seems completely indifferent to it. Okay, if we want to talk about the justice of God, okay, a lot of times the theodicy, the argument, the problem of evil argument goes with God's love. But let's do God's justice here. Okay, if we really had a God that was truly interested in justice on planet Earth, there would be no need for a police force. There would be no need for a court system because anybody who stepped out of line would immediately face God's perfect justice. And even if we were sinners, people would eventually order their behavior or seek not to defy such a God. And, you'd say, oh, then it would be a violation of free will. No, there's no violation of free will. The court system and the justice system doesn't violate a perpetrator's free will or any citizen's free will. You're free to choose, okay? But there's consequences for choices. If we're looking at it as justice, that makes a lot of sense. The free will defense was always one of my favorites, but I don't really go with it anymore because God could still have created a world where free will is perfectly viable, but where people don't actually hurt one another, simply instead of going on a free will issue, that God is simply going to act in justice every time. Is God just? I don't know. The innocent suffer and the guilty get away with it. Now, the argument is that at the end of all time, God will make everything right. But I'm not so sure that it's a lot of comfort to anybody or to the victims. I think it's a false hope and a false comfort because I don't really see any evidence for the existence of said God. But at the same time, it's kind of a real evil son of a bitch thing to say. Okay, dude, if you're really a just ruler of the universe and planet Earth and you see somebody committing injustice, and your justice is going to be perfect because you know all the facts, you have the power to bring that person to justice, and you can do it in such a way that the innocent don't have to suffer, free will could still be intact. Why are you not acting in justice in planet Earth? And so my first accusation as an atheist, if I was sitting there in this dialogue, would be like, dude, what planet do you live on? The innocent suffer and the guilty get away with it. Where are you at? Okay, you're not even giving us a realistic picture of the world. Okay, he also talks about how God is getting after Job for his sin, but there's no evidence of it in the text thus far. I got a couple of those over the last few weeks of people saying, oh, well, Job's guilty of this. It does not say that. It does not say that in the text that Job was guilty of anything. In fact, quite the opposite. God himself testifies that Job is blameless. Okay, so we're either going to have to call God a liar and say Job was a sinner, or we're going to have to say he didn't do anything wrong, wrong, and God is just doing this to test him. Okay, so he's not punishing him. He's not reproving. In fact, this is the very thing that Eliphaz is wrong about, because a lot of other people asked me the same question a couple of weeks ago. Well, who is, punishing Job? Nobody, because it's not about punishment. It's about testing. Okay, and testing is different than punishment. He's not done anything wrong. He's being tested to see if he'll be faithful. Okay, and you can argue that maybe God didn't know. I mean, you could be an open theist about it and say, well, God knew he could succeed this test or fail the test. And he has a plan either way. Okay, but that still doesn't change the fact that it's kind of a dick move. Okay, to take your most loyal subject, the person who's been the most loyal to you, and say, you know what? Yeah, go screw with him. Okay, it's just an evil thing to do. Okay, and a lot of people want to defend God in this story. And I'm going to tell you, right here, this dialogue kind of points out a problem. Because Job basically defends himself, show me where I've sinned. Show me where I've done wrong. Give it to me. If you guys can't tell me where I've done this wrong, so you're no help. Right now I'm despairing of life. I want my life to end. I want to get run over by an African elephant and have it over. But where are you, what are you doing to help me get out of the circumstances as friends? Okay, I'm going to tell you, friends like these, you don't need enemies. Okay, and, I still want God to come down and tell me what I did wrong. Did I sin, or did I do something else, or what was it that caused him to turn his hand against me? Okay. And that's the real rub of the question, okay? I think this first exchange between one of Job's friends and Job's kind of sets the tone, because the rest of it is all going to be about them trying to say, hey, you must have done something wrong, you must have sinned to earn the wrath of God like this. And Job is going to spend pretty much the rest of the dialogue going, I don't think so, okay? I really am trying to figure out where I did that, okay? And I'm not seeing it, okay? And so, when you consider also that this tradition is before the law, okay, the Job tradition of literature predates the Torah, so at least as far as everybody I've ever read has told me. So long before they had a concept of law, there was this literature writing about the justice of God, and they were having to deal with, what they saw in the world, pretty much, to make that connection. And so what do you leave? What do you leave for justice? Okay? How is God just? In what way is he just? Now, we could defend, the justice of God, but we have to discard Eliphaz's charge that the innocent don't suffer. We'd have to say, well, God's standard of justice is that he gets to do what he wants. Whatever he does is right. Might is what makes justice. And to be honest, this is kind of part of one of the themes of Job, is that the reason God gets to do what he wants to do is because he has all the power. In fact, throughout the poetry section of all of these characters, they sing God's praises and his power and his majesty and how he is the ruler. And so they don't have this notion of God being a loving God so much as they have a God that is powerful and just. And their definition of justice is because he has the power, whatever he does is right. Okay? Now, I think we all can see the faulty of the reasoning there, but that's kind of where Job is heading, where Eliphaz is heading with his statement, although I think he's in part wrong. But as we look forward into the rest of the dialogue, you're going to see this tension between Job and his three friends, because constantly they're hounding him about what he did wrong, and he's like, I would like God to answer that question. Okay, I would like God to come down and tell me what the answer to that question is. I don't know. I look at this passage and I see an honest, genuine dialogue, and I don't get Eliphaz's point. Okay, and Job doesn't get it either, because Job's figuring I'm one of those innocent people that's suffering. And he says, I didn't do it, as far as I can tell, I haven't done anything wrong, but I'm suffering. And I want to know what world he lives in that he would make such a charge. Okay, there's plenty of examples of innocent people that suffer And so I don't get the idea here of why he would say that. It's actually not a very smart thing to say, okay? I mean, if he really thought about it, he would have probably backed off of that. And that's probably why God says that he was wrong in his observation. I would say he's wrong in his observation. But Job's further charge is, life is futile if this is the way it's going to be. If God just on a whim can destroy me, I want to know the reason. Okay, now we know the reason, okay? Job in the story doesn't know the reason, but we've witnessed all the events leading up to this in the story. And in the story, we know that this is about testing Job to see if he will remain faithful, because Satan didn't think he was going to be faithful and God thought he was. And so they placed a bet. I don't know what was up for wager, but they placed a bet. They tested Job twice, and he stuck with God. So, it's kind of interesting. So that's kind of where we're at. And this first opening salvo kind of sets the tone for the rest of it. Job's remaining friends will have the same kind of observations about Job. He must have done something wrong. He's being presumptuous, being self-righteous. The list will go on and on as we go through it. But Job's final thing is, I wish I knew. I wish I knew what it was. And because you guys can't tell me, you're useless as friends, I'd rather just despair of life at this point and get on with it, and I wish God would come down and tell me what I did wrong. I think that's it for this one. It's just a nice little opening dialogue. From a literature standpoint, it kind of sets the tone. And so here we are. Now, as an atheist, I think God's justice is a bit of a joke, okay, especially the biblical God, because he very much is a might makes right God, where he says, I'm just and right. Now, Eliphaz is arguing that God, if he was a just ruler, would do good to the innocent and punish the wicked. And I would say that if he was a true just God, that is probably correct. But that's not the picture we're getting right here early in Job, that's the justice of God. The justice of God, according to this book, seems to be more of he gets to do what he wants, okay, because he's God, okay? And so if he does it, it's right. It's automatically right. And anything that he does, you can't, with such a God, you can't debate his morality of his decisions, whether he's being a tyrant or not, because you're basically putting him behind a defensive wall, irony, that God needs a defensive wall, that his justice is different. Okay, I used to hear that from Calvinists all the time, that God's justice is different. I said, well, what basis do you make that charge? It's like, if it's different, then why wouldn't we follow that different justice in order to make our own lives better justice if God is real? And they never really had a good answer to that question. So still waiting. But now I look at it more of, he's got a valid point. If God was truly just, then the innocent would never suffer and the guilty would. Okay? He would be right if that's the kind of biblical God that the Bible's trying to present. And it's just not the way it is. Well, thank you for stopping by. Been a very interesting week. We broke 1,000 subscribers. I want to thank you all very much for that. Current watch hours just broke 2,900 on their way to 3,000. Once I hit there, I'll be able to set up memberships and super chat and all that stuff. So that'll be nice. I'll see what I have to think about with that. And then, then just a matter of getting to 4,000 watch hours to get the good old YouTube ad revenue. So we're much closer. I really feel like we passed a major milestone in this channel's history, and I want to thank all of you for it. Channels like this don't exist without the subscribers and the people that comment and the people that, I thank every one of you. All of you have, there's some of you have in comments that I just really haven't responded to every comment. I just don't have time, as much as I would hate to say that. But some of them are very, very insightful. I have time enough to read them. I read pretty fast, but I want to make insightful responses whenever I can. And so, we need to, keep moving forward, and I appreciate it. My next subscriber goal is probably 1,500. And then just for laughs, we'll probably do 1,666. Just for the fun of it, seeing I missed 666 during my absence. So we'll see what we can do with that. But let's have some fun with it and enjoy it. And thank every one of you. Like, share, subscribe, do the things that you do. You guys are great. Very soon I'm going to reactivate the Rabyd Nation the moment I can get memberships going. So you can buy your citizenry, you can buy your way onto the council. We'll see what happens. I used to do that on Patreon. I'll probably shut down my Patreon account, just so you know, and move everything to memberships. That's kind of more of my simple life philosophy that I keep trying to do with my life. I want to streamline everything and get everything into one place and just make it easier for myself. So just so I save a little bit of time. So thank you very much for that. So I appreciate it. We'll see what happens. Once again, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.